Introduce myself. I'm Lori Libby with Allied Universal and the Business Development Manager for Colorado. Is our sales director. And so we have been asked to come here to talk about active shooter. And in light of what's going on in the world right now, it's a very timely event, but we want you to know that this is also a dark event. And we know that there is a lot of people who may or may not have been affected directly with the events that
I'm the security industry executive. Experience, and we've done this a few times. It's a little bit humbling. Sorry, problem history here.
I had a pop-up.
Can anybody hear me?
Okay, yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us now?
Yes.
Okay.
My company is new. I can make a real quick intro and explain what we do for buildings. We're new in this
Who's this?
group. My name is Mike Tackett.
Oh, hey, you know what? I would love to set you up for a vendor spotlight here soon.
Okay.
Because I think, yeah, you probably could help me with my data and public safety on my cell service. So thank you, Mike, for speaking up.
Yeah, you might need cell phone service in an active shooter situation.
Right.
Absolutely.
Look, maybe have that at the end of the presentation so we can talk a little bit more about other options.
Sure.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so as we mentioned, we're going to talk about the emergency preparedness through that active shooter lens. If we can move to the next slide, I believe we already did introductions. So if the next slide's intros. There we go. Yep, we can skip right over that one. That's my ugly mug and Lori. All right, so we're going to talk about a couple of different things today. We're going to talk about the training that goes into an active shooter event, and the training that goes into preparing for an active shooter event. We're going to talk a lot about the post-event things that we can do as building engineers, building owners, building managers, what we can do to make sure that our employees and our tenants feel safe and also know that they're safe if an incident occurs. We're also going to show a video a little bit later on. Lori will give a brief intro to that video before we show it, but it's a Department of Homeland Security video that we do like to share. It's the Run, Hide, Fight video that you may be familiar with. You may have seen it in some other areas as well. And then finally, we're going to talk about some of the takeaways, the plan, the after action plan, how to respond, and then open it up for question and answers, which is a perfect time to talk about cell phone service when we need it during an active shooter event as well. So if we can move to the next slide. So this is a shocking statistic, right? I'm going to leave this up here for a moment. I want everybody to read this statistic. I'm not going to read it to you. That statistic is staggering. That's 2021, right? 2021 only. We're only a quarter of the way into the year, folks. We can move to the next slide. Well, the 2020 numbers haven't actually been released yet. It's no secret right now that these incidents are on the rise. Oh, I'm sorry. We have the definition here. I'll talk about that in a moment. These incidents are on the rise, all right? One of the most staggering statistics that we've found is the involvement of law enforcement in these incidents. Because typically, and Lori will talk about this a little bit later on, law enforcement is typically the response that ends an active shooter situation. But when we look at law enforcement's responses to the active shooter situation, in 2018, we lost or had injured 8 law enforcement officers in active shooter events. In 2019, over double the injuries and the deaths of our law enforcement partners when it comes to these events. That's over 100% increase. So what we're going to talk to you about today is preparation, and you're going to hear us talk about partnership with our law enforcement partners, an awful lot. You don't want the first time your law enforcement partners are walking through your building to be an active shooter event. Reach out to them ahead of time. Trust me, they jump at the chance. Lori will talk about that in a moment. So let's talk a little bit about what an active shooter is, right? Really, to boil it down, it's an armed person that's in the process of engaging in a shooting spree, right? It's an individual coming in with some malintent, may be political, may be emotional. It could even be a result of workplace violence, which we're going to talk about on the next slide. But an active shooter, boiled down into its most simplest form, is someone with a firearm intending to do harm in a large scale way, right? We can move to the next slide. So workplace violence. A lot of times active shooters and workplace violence get confused with each other. They are interchangeable very often. A lot of times a workplace violence event, I'm not going to read the definition on the screen, I'm sure you can all read that. A lot of times a workplace violence event or a workplace violence situation or a workplace violence issue can escalate into an active shooter event, right? Typically, we look at the warning signs of workplace violence when we're looking at our employees, when we're looking at our direct reports, when we're checking people in as a security function at the door. But you folks know these individuals better than anybody, right? You interact with individuals on a daily basis. If there's a change in behavior, if there's a change in their demeanor, you're going to notice it before one of your vendors do, right? Or before somebody else in the building might. So it's important to understand the warning signs of workplace violence and what workplace violence is, because it does flow directly into the active shooter situation. We can move to the next slide. This one's again another staggering slide. Think about what you spend most of your time doing when you're not at home, or when you're not at work, I'm sorry. Shopping, engaging in commerce, going out and about. Where is the majority of these workplace violence mass shooting events taking place? They're taking place in areas of commerce. I'm not even going to talk about the ones a few weeks back and the most recent ones. They're happening in education. These are places where people are not expecting an active shooter situation. That's one of the draws for the active shooter, because people aren't prepared, not ready for it. I don't think there's a single person in this room that doesn't think differently when they walk into King Soopers today than they did a few weeks back, right? What you're thinking about differently is preparation. You're looking at the exits, you're looking at the people, you're assessing your surroundings. You're doing that more now than you ever did before. Take those thoughts, take those premonitions, take those tinfoil hat ideas, as I like to call them, and bring them to the workplace, because that is what's going to help protect you and your building from a workplace violence or an active shooter incident. Move to the next slide. So when it comes to the response plan, we talked about the law enforcement injuries, we talked about the loss of life of our law enforcement partners. Let's talk a little bit about their response. And I'm sorry, I thought Lori was going to talk about this when I'm actually speaking about it. In every active shooter situation, it's typically required. Law enforcement is required to stop the response. We have some statistics we'll hand out to you in a pamphlet here a little bit later on, where it talks about the different endings of these active shooter situations. And what you'll see in those statistics, there was only one in the 2 years that are referenced on those pages that were ended by anybody other than a law enforcement officer. And I think we all remember the Texas church, right? The individual that took it upon himself, saved a lot of lives that day. These active shooter events can be between 10 and 15 minutes. That's the whole scope, folks, from beginning to end, 10 to 15 minutes. Law enforcement response time could be anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes on a good day. Right now, with everything that we're dealing with COVID and the different things going on in our social situations, law enforcement times are on the rise. What's your plan at your building, right? Think about that. And Lori's going to talk a little bit more about that, but I did want to talk about this right here. And I am going to read this verbatim because I do think it's something that people don't think about an awful lot. If we all remember back when we were kids, right? We went to school, we had the hurricane, tornado drills where we had to get under the desk, right? And put our hands or our heads in our laps. Why did we do that as children? Anybody?
Protect from falling.
Protect from falling, exactly. But we did it so often that it made it muscle memory. If you practice something enough in an extreme situation, it becomes muscle memory, and you don't have to think to react. When you're under a sudden stress and fear, your pupils are dilated, your heart's thumping, your lungs are heaving, your adrenaline is surging, your stomach and bowels are in turmoil. your ability to distinguish time, colors, and distance diminish. You revert without even thinking about the habits that you learned. So again, I'm going to take it back to that drill scenario when we were all children in school, right? We did those drills on a regular basis. It drove us en masse, right? At the end of the day, we did it for a reason. We did it for muscle memory. As adults, when it comes to an active shooter situation, you want to approach it the same way. Establish that muscle memory with your team because it will save lives. And at the end of the day, when we say the team, make sure that it truly is a team. It's not just the building owners, it's not just the engineers, it's not just your tenants, it's your security team. It's your construction team that might be on site. It's your landscaping team, it's your janitorial team. Every one of these different individuals are going to have some type of a hand in that situation. Make sure that they're all together and training on it that way. Move to the next slide. All right, so the next, and Lori, I'm going to let you introduce the video because I know you have a little bit of a thing to say, but the next one's a video from the Department of Homeland Security. I'll let Lori tee it up and she'll bring the rest of the presentation out.
So many of you might have seen this video. I can tell you I've seen it 100 million times, and I still pick something different out of it every time. When there was a rise in active shooter situations, the Department of Homeland Security came together and they put this video together. And so we're going to show it to you all. Just for everybody who is also online, we wanted to make sure that the resources are here so that you can find it as well. You can Google Run, Hide, Fight easily, and this video will come up. But we'll go ahead and show that video.
It may feel like just another day at the office, but occasionally, life feels more like an action movie than reality. The authorities are working hard to protect you and to protect our public spaces. But sometimes bad people do bad things. Their motivations are different. The warning signs may vary, but the devastating effects are the same. And unfortunately, you need to be prepared for the worst. If you were ever to find yourself in the middle of an active shooter event, your survival may depend on whether or not you have a plan. The plan doesn't have to be complicated. There are 3 things you could do that make a difference. Run, hide, fight. First and foremost, if you can get out, do. Always try and escape or evacuate, even when others insist on staying. Encourage others to leave with you, but don't let them slow you down with indecision. Remember what's important, you, not your stuff. Leave your belongings behind and try to find a way to get out safely. Trying to get yourself out of harm's way needs to be your #1 priority. Once you're out of the line of fire, try to prevent others from walking into the danger zone and call 911. vibration mode on your cell phone. And if you can't find a safe room or closet, try to conceal yourself behind large objects that may protect you. Do your best to remain quiet and calm. As a last resort, if your life is at risk, whether you are alone or working together as a group, fight. Act with aggression. Improvise weapons. Disarm. Commit to taking the shooter down, no matter what. Try to be aware of your environment. Always have an exit plan. Know that in an incident like this, victims are generally chosen randomly. The event is unpredictable and may evolve quickly. The first responders on the scene are not there to evacuate or attend to the injured. They are well trained and are there to stop the shooter. Your actions can make a difference for your safety and survival. Be aware and be prepared. And if you find yourself facing an active shooter, there are 3 key things you need to remember to survive. Run, hide, fight.
How many people have seen that before? Really, very few of you. Fascinating. So that video is available for everybody. It's they want people to use it, take it, show it to as many people as you can. It's a little sensitive. There's some interesting things in there, right? The killer obviously looks like he's like Rambo. You know, the security officer goes first. There's a lady cowering in the corner, but it gets the point across, right? So when we're pertaining to these kind of events, the run, hide, fight method is great for your workplace, but also in any scenario that you should be caught in. The first thing that we want to do is run, right? We want to be able to figure out how can we get out of the way. We don't want to be in any harm's way. And so that also clears the route for police officers that are coming as well. So when you go to public places, and this is just the reality of our world right now, is that you should look at what's your exit route. You should, when you're leaving, if you're involved in an incident, you are responsible for yourself. So get yourself out of there. You know, I have my purse and everything over there. I'm not running to go get it. So you want to make sure that you're leaving your belongings and just getting out of harm's way. Don't stop and help the wounded. I know that that is one that's a little hard to swallow, but the goal is life preservation right now. And also when you heard in the video and also what Mike alluded to, most police response, their first deal is to stop the threat, whatever that means. So they want to neutralize the threat, whether it's apprehended or that they encounter the suspect. So that's kind of where we started. So this response plan applies a lot. Just go to the next one. The next one is hide, right? So if you're in harm's way, I love pushing the copier because I feel like, you know, in incidents like this, you have universal strength that can push you through. But we want to look out at a place where you can hide and where you can barricade. And I remember sitting in a conference room being really excited about starting my security career and working with some property management folks. And I was like, gosh, this is such a cool conference room. There was no windows, there was nothing going on. And about 3 days later, I heard my first active shooter incident. And I thought, oh my gosh, that day I would have asked everybody to go hug in the corner. And that would have been what we did. And so I didn't think of what my response plan would have been in general. I didn't think about, should I hide? Is there anything that we could do? How are we going to do this? I just saw there was a plant and maybe we should just hang out by the plant. So when you're looking at this, you gotta just take all of your options into place, right? It makes you look at this room a little bit differently as well. How would you hide if you had to hide in this room? There's some corners, right? There's some ways that you could get out. Our next slide is fight. And at the last resort, right? Then you're in harm's way, you're close. You have to commit to what you're doing. And you have to look at rooms and spaces that you're at differently and figure out what are those objects and things that you can do to help save your life and the life of people that are in there. That's the reality of where we're at right now, right? So you got to commit to that. Run, hide, fight. You can say it a million times and it's probably not enough. We want to create that muscle memory, just like Mike was talking about, where you know exactly what happens, because when your adrenaline gets running, you can't think straight, right? How many people have almost got into an accident, slammed on a brake really hard, and you have that huge rush feeling coming through, right? Think about that multiplied 500 times. If we can go to our next slide.
Real quick, Lori, can I just
Yeah, go ahead.
comment there? The commit to the actions. I think if you do choose that fight option, obviously that's the last option you would select. But if you do select that fight option, you have to commit to it. You can't throw a stapler on it.
It's an animated.
I know that's funny. I said it to break up the monotony a little bit, but if you throw a stapler at a guy with a gun, it's not going to end well. If you need to commit to fighting, commit to the fight. Everything's wet in that conversation. Go ahead.
Absolutely. Yep. So we like to go back to our resources, right? Quite a bit that are available to anybody. And this is what we train off of in a lot of the different spaces that we work in as a security company as well. So the active shooter DHS guidelines are available online for you as well. And I'm going to be sending a couple of PDFs to you all so that you'll have them as a resource that you can take back to your companies or to your employers, just so that you have them. It's great for you to read through them. And then we'll also send you some statistics as well. And then we're going to send you a pocket guide that has the run, hide, fight information on it as well. Unfortunately, I just left that one at Kinko's this morning. So, so you don't have that. But this, I think you probably all have had a chance to maybe look a little bit of what this is. We're just talking about what the profile is. It's the characteristics as well. And then that same, how do you respond to shooters in your vicinity? And this goes for your workplace or any public scenario that you could be in as well. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, I didn't know that this did this. Okay, so this is a really important one. And it's one that is a little bit near and dear to my heart, because it's how do you respond when law enforcement arrives, right? A lot of times we, in situations, need law enforcement. We look at them as help. We want to hug, we want to get out of there, we want to follow them. And their first item on site is not you. It's to neutralize the situation. So we want to make sure that we don't reach out and grab them, which is something that I kind of thought that I might do too. So we don't want to do that. We want to make sure that our hands are spread so that we can see there's nothing in my hands. You'll see a lot of news media where you see people leaving, right, with their hands up. So they know that none of these people were the people that were involved. The other thing is pointing, fast movements, right? So if they're looking through their peripheral and they're surveying a situation, very much, we want to be careful not to try and draw their attention away from what they're doing. So this is really important. And we'll have a lot of police officers who will talk about this. They want you to stay calm as you can. And as they come by you, as they're getting the situation cleared, they will be able to acknowledge you, get some verbal cues, and figure out where they need to go. So that's really important. The next thing is talking about 911. If anybody ever has to call 911, and I don't know how many people have ever had to, but the people on the 911 side are amazing. They're so calm and can get a lot of information out. And it's important that you try to give as much information as you can. Multiple people are calling 911 at one time. So they're trying to disperse all of the information and figure out what they can do and figure out where they are. So the more information you can give them, where your location is, where you are in the building, where you are in the public entity of the space that you're in, is going to help guide them, because they have that direct communication to officers as they're responding to the situation. And then we go to kind of coping with an active shooter situation and just dealing with how you handle some of the exits. And just taking notice, right? Unfortunately, like I said, this is our world right now. You just need to take notice of be aware of your surroundings. It's one of our options in security is we observe and report, right? So we're always looking for different ways of buildings. Many of you are involved intimately at buildings, and so that's good to share that information with your management team and make sure all of the team and your vendors that are on site are aware of the situations as well. So we'll talk a little bit about what are the things that you can do with your teams to prepare. And that is pretty much anybody, whether you're an employee or an employer or a building owner or a manager or an engineer. We're trying to build that muscle memory again, right? So the more things that you can do, the better. We talk about trying to discuss different scenarios with people and then continuing to change that scenario. But bringing your engineers, your janitorial team, your security team, your landscaping team into a tabletop exercising and running through scenarios like this is so important and vital to the success of how an event like this turns out. And it also creates that muscle memory, and it allows you to create the what ifs, right? What if someone isn't on site? We want to determine who is going to be your point of contact in the emergency situation. And then you also need to figure out what if that person isn't available, right? We had a situation in the tech center several years ago that we were a part of. It was a rather large incident, and unfortunately, all of the point people were gone. It was over the holidays, they were overseas, and this manager was trying to deal with everything on her own. We came in as the security team. I was handling media contact and pushing people off the site to get them away. This was not in our plan. It was nothing that we had ever planned for or even talked about. We didn't plan for over a Christmas holiday. We didn't plan for multiple people at the executive level being overseas and not available. And we didn't have a canned statement that was able to give. So one of those things is important is to talk about who handles the media. Media is so fast right now. I mean, somebody can get something out on Twitter faster than you can. So having those canned response and knowing who can pull the trigger on those, sorry, no pun intended, is important to know. And then just making sure that everybody has access to it and everybody knows when it's okay to send that information out. So I like to ask, what if that person is not available? What if the next person's not available? And those are just kind of my what ifs when we talk through scenarios that we finally feel like that we've come through a solution, and then we say, well, wait, what if? So playing those scenarios is really important. Some of the things that we also want to talk about is, how do you recover a building? That's a big one. Do you have relationships in place with restoration for cleanup and construction? Those are things that you have to think about. The building will not be yours, or the space will not be yours until it's released from the police. So there needs to be someone who can be the contact for incident command. And then once it's turned over, it's turned over. So now you have to figure out, how do you get back to normal, and how do you recover that feeling of safety that we feel like we go to. I can tell you, I had to go to King Soopers to get some mozzarella cheese for some pizza I was making. And I walked in and saw the magnolias, the candles, the individuals. My mozzarella didn't seem that important. So we have to figure out, how do we get back to business, and how do we communicate that? Go to our next statement. Once you're in your post-incident, when you have an incident command and the police are going through the building or the public place, you really want to figure out, who can you talk to? Who can they talk to? And are there multiple people? Because sometimes it needs to be, the assistant manager, or maybe it's the engineer, or maybe it's a particular vendor who is handling tenants, who's handling employees, so that disbursement of information can be worked together and in a timely fashion. Maybe it's your HR, maybe it's your media contact, but no matter what size your company is or how big your family is, this is also information that you should think about as well, especially when we have incidents that have happened in public. You know that the media does reach out to families. So just kind of thinking through some of those things helps you have that adrenaline softening and understanding, like, I can think clear through this situation and I can respond. Thank you. One of the final things that I like to talk about, and it's some things that happened this year, and it's also an emergency situation, is to have a post-incident debrief. It's really important to go through and talk with your teams about what does a post-incident look like. Can you document as much as you can document? Whether it's voice recording, whether it's writing it down, whether it's collecting video footage, anything that you can have, you want to get through as much as possible and have it documented. Whether it's for police, for any court, for any media statements that come through. And then you also want to make sure that you're talking with your team so that you understand and have that human connection, that human touch to figure out where do they need to be met, what resources do they need to have. So post-incident debriefs are important on anything. I would say most things that you have in an emergency situation, whether it's weather, whether it's a car accident, that was something that I would always suggest that people do. It brings your teams together to really talk about it and really take your lessons learned and go to the next step. What do we have next? I think that's it, right? Almost.
There we go.
Okay, so if anything that I hope you take out of this today is that it's a very high level approach to talking. We didn't get down in the weeds, right, about particular incidents, about particular people, but you can find a lot of that information if you want to read more about it. I like doing these things because I like knowing that I used to think that I would hang out in a conference room and huddle with someone. And now I feel that I'm prepared that if a situation were to happen, I can direct, I can talk about it, and I feel comfortable and that I'll have the best chance that I could possibly have for survival. So I hope that you'll share these resources that we're going to give you with your team, with your employers, and just talk about it. It's scary, it's sad, it hurts, but the better prepared we are, the better that we can plan, and then the better that we can respond. So I have some handouts for you that I'm going to give you, or we'll put them at the back table if you want to take them. What they are is, this gets a little bit more in the weeds. This is the active shooter incidents in 2019. The ones for 2020 haven't been completed yet, so I'll show that if you can see that. And this is all of the information on what FBI has. It's very interesting to read. There's really interesting statistics. And I always am of the mind frame, the more you can read, the more you can learn, the better prepared you'll be. So I just wanted to be able to share this information with you since we know what these resources are. And then additionally, we'll provide some other ones that you can share with your teams from Department of Homeland Security as well. So with that is really our presentation. If there's anything else you want to add, Mike?
Just one thing, Lori touched on it as well. I take a real humanistic approach to security in our business. These people are people, right? Whether it's the individuals that were involved in the incident, the individuals that might have been around after the incident, people that talked to these individuals. What you have to do post-incident as well, and Lori touched on it, was check their mental health, right? What's your employee assistance program look like for your organization, your building, your company, whoever it is you work for? What is the after plan to get green counselors in to talk? How are you assessing your employees to make sure that they're ready to return to work after what they've seen? We were the provider at a local healthcare institution after the theater shooting several years ago. Our security professionals saw things that are only saw on active war zones overseas that day. It was weeks. Our employee assistance program was there talking to people, making sure they were okay, talking to us about who needed to go to a different site, who needed a different standard of scope. So think about that as you're looking at your plans too. Remember, these are people. And even if the person wasn't there, they might have been affected by it as a ripple effect. So make sure that you have the right resources in place. Lori, great job. Thank you.
One other thing I'll say that I forgot to touch on a little bit more is just that our police departments, they train all the time. And they train for these incidents. And coming into a building like this, if they hadn't been in this building, there's a lot of nooks and crannies, right? So talking with your public information officers, talking with your training officers, just talking with whatever local jurisdiction that you're in, and offering the space that you have, even if it's an employee space, they will take advantage of that a lot to come in and bring new trainees or just to keep their resources sharp, right? Just to know what they've got to look like around corners and things like that. Sometimes it's scary, sometimes our owners don't really like that, but it is an option to make that connection with our police departments and let them see what your floor plates are so that should some scenario happen, they're very familiar with your building. So I know that they've taken us up. We've done multiple full-scale active shooter situations and planning and drills and all sorts of things like that. But it's been a great partnership to work with them through those things. And it makes us feel better that they know more about the buildings that we have out there. So anyways, questions, comments?
I have a question. Can you direct, do you have any maybe specific thoughts on what a building engineer's role should be if this happens? I mean, you're talking to a bunch of engineers here. What should these guys be thinking about if it happens in their building? Is it any different than those of us who are tenants or guests? And if so, what should they do? How do they make this a safer environment for the people that it's happening to?
So my initial response is run, hide, fight. Same.
Same.
First is get out and be safe, right? I would like to be the hero. It would be great, but it is not at your expense when law enforcement is there to do that. And I think that that is a role that really needs to sit down with all of your teams and talk about on who's on site. Same thing with like, some people have security on site 24/7. And so you'll have someone who may be there in the evening that's not there. That would take a different point. So what I would really suggest is to have those tabletop exercises or have those meetings where you can train and talk together and say, what should my role be? Because the engineer role may be that they're out of there or they're off site that particular day, but they've got the contact list and they can say, I'm the one who's going to send the button that says everybody needs to shelter in place, or there is a situation, or, contact, or everybody go to your refuge spot. So those situations, it's hard to make a blanket statement, I would say, Kim, on saying, you know what, Mike, you should always be the one who holds the door open for everybody. I didn't mean to sacrifice you, but, so that's, and it's also an evolving situation, which is why I love these tabletop exercises and why I like to run through different scenarios of what just happens. I mean, we don't plan for a car to run through the building, but it's happened, right? So I would say that from the engineers that are in here, what I would press upon your management teams is to really be the one who's got the thought leadership to take back to them that says, that asks some of these questions that maybe someone isn't thinking about. And I will tell you, having some of our janitorial team in some of these tabletop presentations, they have come up with some of the best ideas that you could imagine because they look at the property from a different way. Same with our landscapers, same with our construction people. So getting those people together and inviting them to have feedback on what should happen in this scenario just opens your eyes to what that looks like. I think the plan always evolves. We have emergency preparedness guidelines for just about everything, which is very similar, right? Tornado, we're not going to run out of the tornado, but we're going to, try and hunker down and make sure we're in a good, safe spot. So that would be my suggestion for that is really as leaders in this room is to take that back to your leadership team and say, let's talk about this. How would we handle this?
What about proactively though? I think building engineer knows every exit in the building. Are they people who work in an office environment come in the front door and go up the same elevator and they don't even know where half the doors and exits in the building are proactive?
Yeah, right.
Educate the tenants on where exits are.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And in a lot of the tenant handbooks that most people get, there's usually floor plans or floor plans in there. And if there's not, even at your floor warden training or your annual training, it's a thought leadership to send it back to your management teams and say, hey, maybe we should include a building floor plan in here so everybody knows where the exits are. We should mark them or where their floors are. That's definitely stuff that is proactive that you could do. I'm one who always walks in and looks at the fire escape plan because that's a great floor plate that shows me what's going in there. But practically, that is a great thing that you can do and make sure that they're in your tenant handbook or they're on their online tenant stuff as well.
So Lori, is there ever a point where within your specifications of completing this, a person might pull the fire alarm just to get everybody in the building? I mean, does that ever come into play? Or?
Yeah, it's a controversial statement. Yeah, there has been a lot of thought, like in a couple of years over that about, do you tool the alarm because you can't get anybody to get anybody out? But then if you've got an active shooter on floor one and you've just rushed them with all of these people, you've put all these people in harm's way. So I can't tell you 100%, and we ask this to our police force all the time who are it's a question that's been floating around for years. What do we do? How do we get people out there? How can we quickly let them know what's going on? And most of the time, it's not going to say, let's pull that alarm to get people out, then there is also the reverse conversation that says that if we pull the alarm, people aren't coming in. Same question goes to, do you lock the building down? Multiple. Yeah,
Years ago, it used to be, the idea was to pull people on, and after a couple of these active shooter situations.
well, and one of the things that lessons learned from the Aurora shooting, I don't want to get too in the nitty gritty in that, but was that the way that police and fire respond together and paramedics respond together has dramatically changed as well. And so now they have a much more coordinated effort together in response to that. So there's been some great lessons learned that have come out of that. You can read about some of that information if you want to online as well. I just like to be very sensitive because we have so many people that have been involved in different scenarios. But what else?
Okay, so you guys are security people. Let's talk about your security guard. What is their role? What are they supposed to do if this happens? Are they trying to neutralize the shooter? Are they trying to get people out? How do you know what the security person is and is not supposed to do?
Same question, same scenario for our security officers is we don't ask them to put themselves in harm's way.
So,
Right.
Rev,
So
run high.
they have more intimate knowledge about the buildings, right? Just as any of the management team would if they're on site a lot. And so we usually will ask them to be part of that gathering team to talk with management, to talk about what they witnessed, to be able to help guide police officers as well, which is, engineers is a huge resource. And then also we talk about sister buildings and sister facilities, right? So if something's happening at your building, is there someone within your company that has additional information that can move on or whatnot? So those are a couple of things that we think about from a security standpoint role. Again, I know I'm probably not really answering your
No, it's
question,
okay. I just
but
didn't know.
it's an evolving situation, right? So the security officer is not going to sit there and
We're
direct
not
everybody.
supposed to say, go get them.
It's interesting. A lot of people will go with armed security for that reason, right? They think if I have a person with a gun in the front desk, they're going to neutralize it. At the end of the day, our security professional is the exact same as you and I are as it relates to enforcing laws. So if our security professional is the hero, right, let's say that they do take it upon themselves to neutralize the threat, you're going to see that security professional let out of the building in handcuffs, just like you or I do. So we also have to consider that as well. There's a difference between security, executive protection, and law enforcement, right? Executive protection will take a bullet for somebody, that's what they do. Law enforcement will come in and neutralize a threat. Security is meant to deter an attack. Now, you'll have individuals, they're in security for a reason, right? They want to do good, they want to help, and we love that, right? But we can't ask them. They're a security position, they're not a law enforcement.
I think you'll find the statistics are interesting that outside of one incident, which was the one in Texas that we referenced, all the situations have been handled by law enforcement. So, this is a race that they have been running, unfortunately, for a long time and are continuing to tweak their response times and how they handle the situations. So, with the amount of incidents that we've had across the country, the fact that only one has been by someone outside of law enforcement is a huge testament to how they respond and take care of the situations. So, is there anything else?
What are your thoughts on the shooter detection systems?
Like the ones that they're putting out here.
They're everywhere now.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
I don't have any personal feelings on them. I know that the police like them. We have a lot of fireworks going on too, so I know there's been some interesting work in trying to figure out, are they fireworks or shots and
Well, there's
figuring that out.
outdoor ones, and then there's in buildings having installed in buildings so they can block out certain areas and they can detect shots.
Yeah, I have not had, I can't really speak to that, and I wouldn't want to. On that, I've been in multiple presentations where our police have talked about what they look like from the area. And they'll run you'll get a lot of the alerts, or we get a lot of the alerts that saying that if you hear shots, it's them testing their systems that they have out there, so they can try and zero in on where the threat might be if there's an external threat. But, I would wonder, my question would be, would you be able to really lock down a scenario, part of a building like that? But yeah.
What's the liability on locking down that area, just
Yeah.
in there, who are you locking in with the shoe?
Well, it's not, a lot of it's not knocking the locking buildings. It's like you can telling law enforcement exactly what part of the buildings and stuff like that. I'm just curious if you guys have.
I think the more information that law enforcement get is,
Yeah.
it's great. Like, we've seen in LA, there's a fire system, or a fire alert system that the LAPD runs with, where it alerts them to everything that's going on in the building. And as they're rolling, they've got floor plates coming in, they've got everything, and that is, I would love to see that kind of technology get here a little bit better. And maybe that's starting, to come more.
That's kind of what they're proposing. So
But I think
it's.
I would love for them to see that walk in.
It's already getting there pretty much with FirstNet, to where they're starting to carry like a smartphone device. And I've already seen some jurisdictions where they're using it. And like you said, if they can upload the floor plans and have all this information available, and it seems like in some of the larger cities that you see these events happening, they do have this information available. One thing I thought was interesting was, did you actually talk about an exit interview as part of your security process? Because a lot, and like in some times whenever you let an employee go, I think changing the locks, making sure they do not have access to the building afterwards is an important security step also. I think everybody here has probably had a situation where you let an employee go and then you kind of wonder what could happen in that situation. And so you take those precautions ahead of time. That's one thing you can do.
Yeah, and also making that relationship with your tenants, because what tenants are doing with their employees, you don't know if there's an investigation, or if someone who's been working there for 30 years is, termed for a reason, and we've seen them coming into the building all the time, so we just open the door. Piggybacking is a huge thing. So also understanding what happens with your building from who has building access. Is that tenant controlled, or is it management controlled? And if it is, just making sure that you have created that vortex of communication where you're really touching base with your tenants, that if you need to turn off Lori Libby's access card, it's turned off, just to protect the building as well. Those are some proactive things that you can do too.